Okay, can you tell that story again about whose wife was it?
About what?
Whose wife was it that had cancer?
Yeah, well, it's, this man came to us to tell us that his wife was dying as a result. He heard from one of her, well, I don't know, I suppose one of her medicine people.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we didn't go through the steps of service because that means first the company and then the medicine, well, right on up the line, and probably take 2 weeks to get the answer. We phoned Eisenhower, and Ike said, put him on the first plane home.
Yeah, what was it like talking to?
The next morning, our commanding general came in with a sour look on his face. What the blankety blank are you trying to do here? You took one of my captains. Didn't tell me. We said, we phoned Ike, and he said, put him on the first plane home.
Yeah.
He said that was wonderful. No, and you should have seen the expression on his face. It changed it early.
Yeah. What was that like talking to General Eisenhower?
Yeah.
What was it like?
Well, of course, he was a busy man. He said, I'm sorry to hear that, but I won't have to go home and be with his wife. Put him on the first plane.
Yeah, that's awesome. What did you think of General Eisenhower while you were serving?
Well, I've watched Ike for a long time because when I was in service, I used to visit here at the museum and so forth and go through all of everything. And when he, of course, was president, he's a great man.
Yeah, did you have any other interactions with General Eisenhower?
Not really.
No.
He was such a busy person. But I always had kept an eye on him. I have lots of pictures of him that were taken at different times in his service, you know, with the servicemen.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit more about where you were during World War II? Like, where all did you go?
Well, in World War II, after all of this, moving to England, and they called us all of a sudden on Christmas Day, believe it or not, 330 people to fill spots over across the English Channel who had been killed. They needed them to replace those people. So that all of a sudden meant that we had 830 people we had to wait for to get filled up again. So it was in February before we finally got across there. But we got at Le Havre, France is where we landed. And then they put us on those, what they call 40 and 8s. Do you know what that is?
No.
You've seen the people on railroads and on what looked like a regular old car, a little short. 40 and 8 simply meant this car will hold either 40 people or 8 horses.
Wow.
That's where the old name 40 and 8 came from.
Okay.
So they put us on the 40 and 8, and we had to move not only what was left of France that we had to go through, but also Belgium. And we got to the point where, just across, well, in fact, we were within shooting distance of the German,
Wow.
And here came the man from, well, he was the one man. There are 3 regiments in the university, and ours was number 271, 272, and 273. We were the 271. This man, who was the Red Cross field director, came to me and said, I want you to be my clerk. I don't know. I can't prove it. I have a feeling that he knew from the test that I had taken 120 words a minute had something to do with it.
Wow.
But I spent all that time with him, and I've never been sorry. I felt good about it.
Yeah.
Because there are all kinds of problems that can develop when you've got that many thousand peoples.
Yeah. So you probably didn't see a lot of combat, did you?
Well, I don't know. There was a lot of it. We still crossed. I'm going to show you something here. I don't know if any place else you could see this. This is my division,
Wow.
crossing Germany.
That's really cool. So you
If
took a
you-
boat over and,
If you'll notice what it is, it covers the central part of Germany.
uh-huh.
These are the people who were the authorities, the commanders. So you know they spread out from both sides.
That's awesome, having the journey that you traveled.
There's no, I don't know of any other place you could find this except in that book. But
What are some of your most vivid memories from serving?
well, I imagine that has to be one of them. But I've got some other, one or two that I think you'd enjoy. Oh, I don't think you're going to enjoy this one. But our division, it's on this map, clear over the end of it. We were the divisions who met the Russians on the Elbe River and put the end of the fighting.
Wow.
They were on the east side of the river, we were on the west side. But we found 2 days later that the Russians were holding 150 American men. All these were armed forcemen. As prisoners. What do you do with that? So I had asked somebody, I said, how do we get them home? And he said, one of the Russians said, well, if you'll have enough crops, we'll let you have them. So the next day we went over there, 20 miles behind their lines. They wouldn't let us have them. We came home empty.
Do you know what happened to those
The
men?
next day, it stirred up a lot of people, our president and theirs and so forth, is voting. How are we going to settle this thing? Well, what it really turned out to be, the Russians said, only if you round up 20 or 150 of those American or German prisoners you have over there, put them in trucks and bring them over here, we'll trade you truckload for truckload.
Wow.
That's the way we got them back. But I have a story that goes with that. That afternoon, I had a young fellow walk into my room. He had a camera hanging around his neck. And he said, they tell me you know something about photography. And I said, it's been my hobby all my life. And so we were talking about it. And he said, I'd have something to tell you. He said, I was a truck driver in this exchange. And he said, I was visiting with a Russian lieutenant. He said, how can you talk so well and hear so well and talk everything so Russian? Because he said my dad came from Russia when he was 18 years old.
Wow.
So he said, I learned it from him.
That's cool.
So this guy said, well, what part of Russia was he from? He told him. He said, well, that's the area I'm from too. He said, did he live in a certain town? And my friend said, yeah. Told him the name of the city. And this Russian said, well, that's my city. Said, what was your dad's name? He said, I told him. He said, he was my best friend till he went to America.
Wow.
Keep this camera, or take this camera home and give it to him.
That's awesome.
You talk about small world.
Yeah. Wow.
You've got the Russians and two of our, well, all of these big numbers of people, thousands of people.
Mhm.
And here these two guys happen to meet.
And from parents from the same town, and him being from the same town. That's
Yep, they happen to be from the same town.
wow. Do you have any other experiences with any of the Russians or Germans or any of the civilians?
Yeah, and Russians haven't had much use for them since either. I'll tell you, well, I've talked to several people. They're over there and here who do. And in most cases, you could say they executed them when they got them back there. But that's the way they work.
Yeah.
I have, well, in fact, I've taken pictures, and I have some at home, of the number or the people, would be hundreds of them, that would volunteer, instead of fighting, they'd volunteer to be a prisoner, German prisoner, simply because they didn't want to go to the Russians.
Yeah. Wow. They must have been pretty bad to their prisoners.
Do you want to tell about, didn't you help the prisoners in the Holocaust?
Yes, that's something we did. Our division happened to be one of the, what they call the Holocaust anyhow.
One of the camps,
Yeah,
concentration camps.
they were, I'm sorry, but they were nothing but skin and bones. The first thing we did was douse them all, because insects, all that sort of thing, just to keep the insects off of them.
Wow. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience? What were you thinking?
For what?
What were you thinking when you helped to liberate them?
Well, about the only thing you can. These poor guys, I don't know how they got here, but we've got to do everything we can to make life visible for them again.
Mm-hmm.
I have a picture at home. I didn't take, somebody else did. But they've talked about the 30,000 people who died because they were in those camps.
Wow.
You know, America is different. We don't treat people like that.
Mm-mm.
It was quite an experience to go across Russia, or to go across Germany with this. There were always something to do.
Yeah.
I can tell you another story that I think you'd be interested in. It was after the war was over. They didn't tell us exactly, but they said, we're going to send your division home pretty soon. 22nd or 29th Division went in on Omaha Beach on D-Day and lost 2,000 people.
Wow.
But we had several people after the word got around that we're going to be going home within a month or two. And we got some letters from people in that division. And they said, our division's not going to go home yet. Can we go with you? But we got in touch with the general. He said, sure, why not? So, it wasn't too long and we began to get some. I don't know how many there were, maybe 15 or 20 of them. But almost every one of them had a German Shepherd dog. And they could tell you how those dogs had saved their lives because, you know, whatever. And so we told them they should come ahead. I went to the mess hall with the dog, and the mess hall sergeant said, you're not bringing that dog in here. I said, if you think you can stop it, go ahead. He said, that dog was right at his feet when he lay at the table.
Oh.
After it was over, this guy'd save a little bit, and they could feed him after they got outside. the colonel who is going to be in charge of the troops on board ship on the way home heard that they were going to bring some dogs. He sent out a letter, actually. There will be no dogs put on the ship. Well, these guys were about to leave those dogs. So they got next to the sailors, and the sailor would put him in a duffel bag and took him on ship.
That's funny.
Got out on the water on the first day, and the colonel found that there were quite a number of dogs on the board ship. He came out with an order that said the dogs will be put overboard. And it wasn't 5 minutes. He had a note that said, one dog goes over, the colonel goes next, and we're not going to miss you. And he backed up in a hurry. The dogs came home.
That's awesome. Oh my
Things
God.
like that happen. But the thing that bothers me is that, I don't know who did it, but a survey of senior high school students here, 72% of them said, I didn't know there was a World War II.
Yeah, it needs to be taught in school, so
How can that go?
I don't know. But it needs to be taught. And this is why we're doing interviews, so then we can show future generations, you know, your experiences, and they can learn from it.
Well, I've had an awful lot of experience with dealing with all those people, because when you're in that situation, you get to contact a lot of people.
Mhm. Yeah. Where were you during D-Day?
On D-Day,
Mhm.
I was still in Mississippi in training with our division.
Okay.
Well, the 69th Division.
Okay.
You notice it's a red 6 and a 2-9.
Yeah. Yep, I can see it.
So,
I wanted to ask, how do you think serving in World War II has affected your life?
well, I think one of the major things probably, first of all, and I'm happy that people don't know it. A lot of people don't know it. And so what? Well, I'll give you an example. I was out at one of our major stores there in Hayes one day, probably 2-3 months ago. I had finished my shopping. What's the name of it? Well, the big store out there. Walmart. Walmart, I couldn't say it. But they have those big glass doors that open up. So I had walked out and I was right in the middle of it. The door was open, I was right just stepping over, and here came this girl, pretty good size. Hit me and just left me flat on the floor. There were 2-3 guys real quick, hey, are you all right? Can I help you? She never apologized, anything. She apparently didn't care, didn't know, didn't care. That bothers me.
Yeah.
When you look at the history, and I don't know whether you know the book, but well, you should, because he's written over 60 books, but his name is Kennedy, Dr. D. James Kennedy. He said, we have too many people in our country who won't let their brain get mixed up with what shall we do. I don't know.
It's important to know what happened, so then, you know, we can protect the things that we have in the world that we're in,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, it was a very interesting experience, I'll tell you.
Yeah. What did you do after the war? When did you come home? And what was that like?
Being what?
What was it like coming home from the war?
Well, they came home. I'll tell you, it's the roughest ride. We had sailors who had been in the Navy for 9 years. Said this is the roughest. Actually, no kidding. It'd come up to all of the pillars that forced the movements would be in the open.
A little bit about that. What was it like serving with some of your friends?
Well, I lost several friends in World War II. They were with us, actually line fellows, you know. Oh, there's so many things that happened during that time. But we lost, I don't know, I'm not sure this list, maybe it does. Yes, it is.
Your friends.
In memoriam, and that's not the only.
A lot of names.
I've forgotten. I have the figure somewhere of how many we lost.
Mhm.
Well, you lost Mark, remember?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about Mark?
Pardon?
Can you tell me a little bit about Mark?
About?
Mark.
Your friend and
Huh?
the one in the airplane. Mark.
Oh, yeah. I used to have, we were very close friends when we were in high school and college. He was a fine French horn player. And so he enlisted in the service in the Air Force. And he was flying one of the Japanese planes, shot him down. So I lost Mark.